Well, we're back.
Well, my internet decided to give me a little crap out. You know what? And it says we're still live here, so y'all got a really good. Yeah, here.
Hey, what's happening?
Gents, that was interesting. Let me tell you, it's been an internet wonderland for me for the last week. So I hope you guys enjoyed that little silence. We're gonna have to do a little editing on the podcast this morning, obviously.
Just a little bit.
Yes. So I think we got through the introduction before I froze. I could be wrong, gentlemen, but we'll say we went through the introduction. It's Data Day, and welcome, Dean, Jeff.
Good.
How are you guys?
Great.
Awesome. Thank you for having us again.
You know what? I figured we should.
Anything in the world.
Yeah, thanks. I figured we should get to it before my internet craps out again, because Rogers is spectacular. Thank you, Canada, for having two major cell phone and internet providers that have a monopoly. We appreciate you so much for charging me over $300 a month in my internet not working.
How about try paying your bills, Dan?
You know what, brother? Unfortunately, I do that. I've thought of not doing it every now and then, considering how much they go down. But, you know, we, whatever. Gents, Dean, what is going on in the world of data this week, buddy?
So during that period of very awkward, uncomfortable silence, I was Googling Bridger because it struck me that that's the name of a TV show from the 1970s. Am I right?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't know. I was born in 76, so
going through the Rocky Mountains, heading to California, something like that. So,
was it a guy on a motorcycle?
No, that was Bronson. Then came Bronson.
Oh, no, then came Bronson. Right. Yeah, you're right.
So that's our useless trivia part of Day to Day. And I've got more stuff, but I'll leave that.
I got more. Never play Trivial Pursuit with Dean. Just saying.
Only if it involves
Dean. Now, Dean, we have a friend of ours who loves these trivia games and stuff.
Yeah.
And my wife and I say all the time that her fun before we come over is for 4 hours reading all the cards before we get there, because she seems to know all the answers to all these really like these questions where you're like, where would you even think, what would make your brain even want to put a piece of that in your memory? Like that is so, and it actually just blows us away how much her and her husband, both of them.
And that's why we appreciate not having Fun Day Friday, because it wasn't that much fun, Dan, like you and Ryan asking those questions that you're talking about right now.
It was awesome. Like, okay, so maybe it's from sitting on this side of the fence to watch your faces go, of course, you're an asshole. Why would you ask that? It's like, yes.
Thanks, Dan. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Yes,
I'm just slow when it comes to that stuff. So anyway, day to day, right? So let's jump into data points. So, something when I looked at the spot rates last week. So as we all know, that spot rates lead contract rates on a 4 to 6 month roughly time frame. What was interesting when I looked at spot rates on Saturday morning for last week, they'd been pretty much at the exact level they've been at for 6 weeks, which I thought was just interesting in and of itself. I mean, a little bit of up and down movement. So that's the average excluding fuel. But it was the same for reefer, dry van, and flatbed. They've all been sitting around this same level. And on the ATBS webinar yesterday with Todd Amon, he said we're sort of bouncing along the bottom of a terrible truckload freight market. And that's kind of where we still are. There's still no meaningful signs that we're coming out of this anytime soon, although I theorize that the hike in diesel again this week, 9 cents up this week. It's up 86 cents since July 4. And if you think about this year as sort of a V shape in terms of diesel prices, they came down pretty much until July 4. I think they got to about maybe somewhere around 380. And then since July 4, they've gone back up. So you've had this V shape chart for diesel prices. And so carriers were hanging in there as rates dropped for the first half of the year. But since July 4, diesel prices have gone up about 23%. That's a lot since July 4. Rates have been flat for 6 weeks, right? So if you do the math, what you can see is that we're back into 2019 levels of profitability. And the only way carriers can get by is obviously reduce the amount of drawings or wages and hopefully get a really good deal with a fuel card. So they're, whipping off 50 cents a gallon off the retail price. So that's where we sit right now. We're still at the bottom of the market, but the more alarming data that I think is yet to emerge is the extent of the UAW strike, particularly if it's extended.
Oh, yeah.
On our show last week, Jason Miller kind of hit us with a bit of a bombshell where he said that an extended strike would, his theory is that we won't see a recovery this year anyway in the freight market, but an extended strike would absolutely guarantee that. It would see in his truckload ton mile index, he said, and I'll just get the number here, he said that an extended strike would probably knock it down about 3% in October. Mm-hmm. So put that into context, July's truckload ton mile index that's based on 41 freight generating commodities, July was down 0.6% month over month, already 2.3% lower than this time last year. So if you sort of extrapolate this a little bit further, you could see another 3% drop by the time we get out of this strike, which puts us into pretty big year-over-year drops in freight demand, which I think, was one of those industry-changing events if that happens. So what we really don't want the UAW strike to be extended from a freight perspective. But
hey, Dean, just real quick, I read an article related to this that the big three automakers only have enough inventory to build vehicles for less than 2 months.
Right.
If this happens to go past that, we're in deep trouble.
Yeah.
Well, I think it goes even beyond that.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at all the companies all the businesses, all the people involved in automotive.
Oh my God.
You know, and I mean, this stretches out all the way to welding companies that supply the robots and the welding materials for automotive, the steel manufacturers, like all of these. It's not just that side of the automobile freight market, like the finished parts. It's all the raw goods. It's everything. And I mean, a lot of these raw goods were already ordered months ago. They're already either on the water or coming in or being prepared. There's going to be this buildup, and then it's going to be a mass expedited frenzy to replace everything.
Yeah.
Well, it affects all the tier 1, the tier 2, the tier 3 service providers as well. It's going upstream. Yeah. I mean, everything.
Plastic molding injections, wires, batteries,
in salary. They want a 46% increase in salary. That's what they're looking for.
Yeah. But if you look at that though, Jeff, right? Like if Dean, the data that Dean brought last week, and for all y'all that didn't watch, go back through the podcast and listen. The UAW workers, when you take inflation and all that, I forget what it was. Like it was originally $40 an hour. Now it's $26 an hour. So I think that's what it was. I know it was numbers around that. So like in the last decade, call it, they've lost 50% of their wages that they would normally get. And, you know, here's the thing, right? Like we look back at COVID and we look back at all this stuff that's happened. Everybody's gotten more money because the cost of living has gotten so much higher. Right. Like I know people that own businesses that are like, you know, my salaries now are like crazy and everything's more expensive, and it's cutting into profitability of companies. So it's this, you know, I don't know. I see it part of as like a people first movement. But I mean, 46% sounds like a lot, but when you take that data into what Dean gave us last week, it's like peanuts. It should be around, well, I'm not going to say it because but you know what I'm saying? It's a, you know, like I've always heard, and maybe you guys can correct me if it's different in the US, but in Canada, like if you have a job with one of the big automakers, there's pensions involved. Like you put in, like it's a pretty good deal, right? And then, you know, that last week, that information really shocked me, Dean, because it was like everything I've ever thought of through my whole life about how good of a deal it is to work. It's like it wasn't. It was kind of, you got the, for lack of a better term, the shit end of the stick. And so. Yeah, I mean, that 46% people outside the industry might be like, holy crap, 46, who gets a 46% raise? But I think they need to interpolate intersect that with the data, if that makes sense. Do you guys catching what I'm laying down?
Oh yeah, absolutely. But you got to think about the trickle down effect as well. It's going to go, I mean, somebody's got to pay for this. So the parts are going to increase. The cost to consumer to buy a vehicle is going to increase because somebody's got to pay for this increase.
Good point.
And then you look at what we're dealing with, to your point, Dan, how are they going to be able to afford it?
I mean, so here's the thing. I think we already have. And the only reason they say that is because my lease was up. So I had to purchase a vehicle almost 2 years ago, which was right kind of in the heart. And like, these pickup trucks, which were typically one of the cheapest vehicles to buy, it's stupid what they're going for. And I have a friend of mine who's looking for a vehicle. My mom was talking to me the other day about a vehicle. Like her mechanic said, like my mom's name's Dorothy. Said, Dorothy, like if you're seriously looking for any vehicle under 40 grand, you're never going to find it.
Wow.
And a Canadian, obviously. And he says, like, even Kias, which typically were known to be not necessarily bad cars, but on the lower end of the scale. It's not like you're purchasing an Audi or a BMW X series or a BMW M series. But he was like, you know, you're actually better off to go find yourself like a 2005 Corolla that's in good shape, that's been well taken care of, because new vehicles are just so expensive these days. I honestly think all this, like we talk about how much more expensive it's going to be with wage increase. I think we're already there.
Right. Well, you're seeing used car prices jack up too now. The used car, I mean, they're going through the roof. Right. So even though you think you're saving, what used to be a $6,000 car, they're selling for $13,000 now. I mean,
my daughter's had her car for 3 years, and I can sell it now for more than we bought it out for. Like literally make money on it. And but the thing is, it's just like homes, right? What are you going to drive next? So now you're gonna get more. And this was the whole thing during probably the last 4 or 5 years in the housing market in Canada. Anyways, like you sell your house and you have a bidding war, and people are outbidding and they're paying $200,000 more, but you're gonna go pay 150 grand, 200 grand more for the house that you want, anyways. So it's like it's this consistent loop that we seem to be through. And, you know, I don't know. I mean,
it's a vicious circle, man.
It's a vicious circle. And I think it's going to have a dramatic impact.
Well, especially if it's extended, right? Because the only reference point we've got is 2019, which involved 48,000 workers, right? So if you multiply that by a factor of 3, you get to 150,000 UAW workers. So an extended strike involving every one of the big 3 is sort of a worst case scenario. And that's where Jason did some really good analytics, where he said, okay, if it's a factor of 3 times worse this time around, he said the impact on the freight market is equivalent to the polar vortex level disruption in February of 21. Now, if you recall, in February of 21, the spot market in particular, was upset literally within a week. We saw about a 10% reduction in capacity because it was stuck on frozen roads. But the market never recovered. And if you look at our year-over-year charts, in that year, that 2021 level, it just took off. And that was sort of one of those industry-changing events that this could be. I don't know that we know just yet. And I'm constantly refreshing the American Association of American Railroads weekly traffic report. It's out on Tuesdays and they publish it on Wednesday mornings, but it's the weekly traffic data for carloads of chemicals, auto parts, steel, intermodal, because it's already at the lowest level in 4 or 5 years. The volume, especially on auto parts. If I click on auto parts, they're little, not too bad, but trending down. Last week's data will be pivotal, I think, in telling us if we're already seeing an impact on rail carload volumes, because to your point, it affects everybody. People that make resins, people that make paint, people that make plastic pellets, the truckload carriers that haul all the plastic pellets that go into the molding of the dash. There's so much that this has potential to impact in the freight market at a time when we're really struggling to find anything that's good. You know, costs are going up and demand is flat, and we're still reeling from the exuberant buying of inventory from overseas in 2021. Like, believe it or not, we're still being affected by that almost 2 years later, which I would never have thought we'd be here right now. So when experts like Jason Miller say, you know, the middle of 2024 with some pessimism, like they're not completely optimistic about that before we see a recovery in the freight market, what that tells me is there's a lot more pain to come on the supply side. Now, if you're thinking about buying capacity, that means that you've still got pricing power, I think. But at some point, the capacity exits the industry in significant numbers that you've got fewer trucks to choose from. And as Jeff knows, that's the kind of the inversion in the market when rates start to go up in the spot market, and that leads us into the next cycle. So that's where we sit. You know, we've been talking, it sounds a bit like Groundhog Day, but this is sort of it's where the market is, because it's in the doldrums. It's really not having any direction other than just being flat, both on a demand and supply perspective, which is really odd because when you're at this time of the year, I mean, if I go back to 2019, spot rates dropped another 9 cents a mile from where they are. So we're identical to 2019 right now in dry van, right at $1.60, identical. In 2019, they dropped another 9 cents before seasonal forces picked in. You had a bit of peak season demand, Halloween, Thanksgiving, retail shopping season, and then rates went back up again. You know, so we've still got some room on our short-term forecast for rates to decrease before they come back up again. But best case scenario, they're flat by the end of the year, which won't help carriers when you think about the impact of fuel, which is already, I think it's about 71 cents a mile is the cost of diesel. We've got maintenance season coming up right now. We've got heating oil season. In the Northeast, most of our heating oil is in the Northeast where Jeff and I live. So we could expect to see some pretty tight inventories in the Northeast and significant impact on diesel prices. I mean, I was paying $5.25 to fill my truck in Pennsylvania just a few months ago. Like, we're still getting above $5 a gallon is a reality for a lot of carriers in the short term. And that could be devastating if rates don't start to show some improvement. So I only say all this because this is sort of the things we look at that could tell us about when the market turns, and when, if you're buying capacity, things start to become a little tighter. It really depends on how many carriers exit the industry in the short term. And that's a number we don't know just yet. I'm anxiously waiting JD Power's auction inventory data. We're sitting about 2019 levels when you look at the number of trucks that are on the auction block. When you go to Ritchie Brothers' website and you look at the pictures, it's eerie. You see rows and rows of Class 8 trucks with sleeper cabs lined up for miles, just waiting to be sold. And that behind every one of those is probably a heartbreaking story of someone who came in during the good times and then went out the back door just as fast. So when I get the next month's inventory, auction inventory data, which is due anytime, hopefully for next week's show we'll have it, that could tell us about the rate of exits, because we're probably 2 weeks away from knowing how many carriers have revoked their MC authority in September. I'll know at the end of September what that looks like. So, this could be that sort of turning point period, September, October, which will be interesting because that's 12 months from when we started to lose capacity in a net negative perspective last year. That's when we started to see the biggest exodus of carriers. It's been going on for almost 12 months, but only drip, 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 because diesel was coming down. Now diesel's gone back up. I expect to see this market turn pretty quickly. But of course,
not only is diesel going back up, Dean, but if you look at it from where we were in 2019, you think about the cost difference that companies have on their books, like their P&L difference from 2019, right? Wages, buildings, if they had to renegotiate leases, like
overheads,
that's the very good word to sum it up. Their overhead is way more. You think about it and say, okay, we're at 2019 levels, which I think, if I remember correctly, 2017, I remember a lot of people complaining because we were at 2013 freight rate levels. And it seems to be this reoccurring theme. But even more important in today's moment would be for all you sales reps out there, all of you people that rely on your suppliers to really make you a living. Have those conversations with them and start the conversation now, because here's the challenge. You don't know until you speak to them if they're hurting. And if they're hurting and you count on them to help your customer meet their supply chain needs, and all of a sudden they're not there, or they sell off half their equipment, or they let go of drivers, or they let go of staff members that you communicate with, all of these cause friction in your logistics network and in your customer supply chain. So have those conversations now. Just talk to them about, prices being in 2019, go back through this podcast and listen to what Dean said about, here's where we were in 2019. Here's where we are now. Your costs have gone up, Mr. or Mrs. Supplier. Like, what do we need to do to help you stay in business so we can continue this relationship? And this is where you can truly, as a sales rep, step away from the crowd and become one that truly, become that force of nature for your supplier. Because I remember you guys, we talked about this so many times a year and a half ago, when the market was up and it was, there was so much demand and very little supply. People were saying, well, build relationships. And then it was, well, you're only building relationships with me because you can't find trucks. And now is where you can shine and you can show your suppliers, like, you're in this for the long run. This isn't just because, in other words, don't take advantage of the fucking market. Like, be that person that Dean talks about that always leaves something on the table. And, I'm urging every single broker out there, step up to the plate and be part of the solution, not part of the problem.
True.
Because, guys, I see it two ways. You're either part of the solution or part of the problem. And us brokers and I'll put myself in there because I've been a broker for 30 years of my career. Jeff's a broker. Dean's driven truck. He knows the deal. I did in the beginning of my career capitalize when rates were down and try and beat people to the ground and try and get make more profit. But why? What did it do? It did nothing.
Right.
And it doesn't do anything for your long-term business development.
Right.
Short term.
Short term's great, but
right. Long term, no sustainability.
So Dean just put in the chat here, small carriers operating costs. Like, this is something every one of you needs to see. So let me just go ahead, Dean, while I put this up.
Yeah, I mean, throw it up. But I've been tracking. I went back and I've got a spreadsheet that I run that's what I call an owner-operator viability spreadsheet. It's kind of captures all the true costs to run a truck down the road. And I've went back to 2018 and I've used actual owner-operator general ledger data back to 2018 to figure out the exact operating costs of a truck within a margin of error, right? Mm-hmm. The average for a long haul carrier was $1.63 a mile for all of 2019, right? Today it's $1.90. So we're talking 27 cents a mile higher to run a truck down the road today. And that's why they're losing money right now in, theoretical sense. And that's about where they were at the tail end of 2019, or at those sorts of unprofitable levels. So our worst case scenario for carriers is that we see an extended period of unprofitable, month over month gross profit margins. And that's a repeat of 2019. And then that just accelerates the market cycle. But there's so much volatility in the market right now, both with, strike action, hurricane season, diesel prices, talk of $100 a barrel for West Texas Intermediate and Brent, already at 10-month year-to-date highs, 9-month year-to-date highs, 9 months, coming up on 10. So that those sorts of things really, could change the market. But we came out of 2019, had COVID not happened, 2018 would have been one of the best years ever in trucking. And that's why people say, well, why do you compare to 2018 or 2019? It's because they're the best reference point we've got for what looked like, the bull market, bear market scenario.
Mm-hmm. So, and it's funny because in 2019, everybody was saying you can't use 2018 as a comparison because it was an anomaly. I remember that vividly. So when you and I actually met at the TCA conference, Dean, it was every single panelist, and we're talking, major contributors in the Canadian market, anyways. For trucking, and they're like, never compare 2018. It was such an anomaly.
Well, it wasn't in a degree because we had 2 Cat 5 hurricanes in late 17. We had Trump's tariffs, which a massive pull forward in late was it 17, right? To beat the increase on January 1. We had changes in the tax code, accelerated depreciation, and an oil market rally. So we had it was a really strong industrial economy for the first half of 18. So that's why people said, oh, that'll never happen again. Well, carriers were making 36 cents a mile gross profit. They went to $1.03 during the pandemic, and now it's down to -9. So this is why you've got to know your operating costs no matter where you are in the freight.
Oh, I got a question.
I'm telling you, I don't know if I'd wake up every morning losing 9 cents a mile, running thousands of miles a week, and still be happy about what I'm doing. To be honest with you.
Hey, Dean, I got a quick question for you. Tricky one. Have we reached the bottom? Have we reached the bottom?
I don't think so, Jeff. I don't think so.
I'll tell you why, but I had to ask that question.
Yeah, I'll tell you why. I think you said, was it Memorial Day was a key point a little while ago. I think Thanksgiving is going to be a really interesting turning point for us because 3 weeks out from Thanksgiving, we see a lot of refrigerated activity, with turkeys getting moved, Christmas tree season starts.
Oh, yeah.
You start to see the reefer carriers that are in the dry van market switch back to the reefer market. And that's normally when rates start to tighten in both reefer and dry van. I think that'll be pivotal. That's what I'm looking for as sort of a turning point. But we, as I said on the show yesterday with Ken, I think we've got a little more room to go before rates start to, hit that bottom that you can say, oh yeah, rates have bottomed out and they're coming back up because right now they've been flat for 6 weeks.
I see that.
It's
So
interesting.
Ryan says, what happened to the intro?
I know.
He's just getting around. So
What
I
happened?
know today's going to be a short one on Data Day, everyone, because Dean's got to catch a flight. So if you are listening before noon today, make sure to catch the SendSpark event with Ryan. That's why he's not on the show today. He's preparing for a massive event for SendSpark where him and Chris Bogg are going to talk all about follow-up and how to master your follow-up with video, DMs, emails, and phone calls. So make sure to watch that. Make sure to subscribe to that. And reserve your lunch hour to be with the logistics monk, Ryan. So everybody, I appreciate that, Dean. I know you got to get out and catch a flight and, possibly lose your luggage and all that other good stuff that comes with flying these days. Sorry, did I just put that out in the air? I apologize, brother. I am so sorry. I can't believe I did that to you. But hopefully my internet holds out for the exit of death.